Thank you, Stephen, for introducing or for opening this third democracy talk. And I'm also very happy, Katarina Popovic, that you joined us today. And briefly to introduce myself, my name is Diana Trevino. I'm project officer at the European University Continuing Education Network, and we are partners of the Democrat Project. I don't know, Vanina, you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. My name is Vanina Morrison, and I'm the online community organizer from the partners at FOGS.
Yes, and Katarina is from the University of Belgrade. She's professor at the Department of Andragogy, and she strongly contributes to adult education as a researcher, but also as an influencer on the political decision making in southeastern European countries. She's also Secretary General of the International Council of Adult Education. But today we will focus and happy to listen to her about the topic of experiential learning, democratic education beyond traditional didactics. So I will pass over to you, Katarina, and I'm very interested in listening to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me today with you and giving me the opportunity to share some thoughts and experiences about the topic that is not only my research topic, but also very close to my heart. And it's based on my own experiential learning for the last, well, a few decades. I've been a part of various civic movements here in Serbia and in the last 10, 15 years also globally. So what I will present a kind of a mixture of research, study data, but also experiences. And let me start by sharing my screen. And you will see that I will briefly talk about, here it is, about three most important aspects that I think we should talk today when we talk about democracy and education for democracy. It's been a topic for a long time, but if you would allow me to say it like that way, we have failed quite a lot. And we need to rethink our approach to democracy education. So these are a few ideas about how to rethink and what to change. So the first one is about the content, second one is about cross-curricular approach, and third one is about the methods. So let's start with the first one, with the content. So my thesis here is that we should move from this usual active citizenship, democratic citizenship, to more global citizenship, and what it means democracy at the global level. What I mean by that is that we should teach more in our teaching democracy. We should teach more about global issues, social, economic, and political issues. It means also that we should include discussing the global challenges for like poverty, also in the European countries that do not have a big problem of poverty, although every country does have to a certain level, but then inequality within the countries, but also among the countries, about the things like climate change, sustainability, sustainable development, and so on. But what is more important, some of those topics are included already, but what is more important is to show how the things are interconnected. So how this global world and those issues relate to each other, especially when we teach democracy in Europe. And I will give you immediately an example of what I think. If we teach, for example, climate change and poverty, or let's say immigration, this is one of the topics that is usually part of this democracy, human rights, interculturalism, and so on, because of a big number of immigrants in Europe, in many of the European countries. So we teach about that. We teach the students, and we talk about interculturalism, openness, integration, and so on. But my thesis is that we should also teach about the background of this whole movement. Why are people coming? What is going on in their countries? And moreover, and that's the critical point, what have we done to make them come, or what have we missed to do to make them come? Meaning, what have our governments done, or the companies, big international companies, most of them based in our own countries, in Europe or USA, and what are they doing in these other parts of the world to destroy, for example, livelihood or environment in these countries, so people are forced to move and to emigrate and to come to our countries. So the background of the issues, or the deeper roots, the causes of the issues. So not stay only on the surface and react to what we see as the consequences, but going to the roots and causes of the phenomena. This will bring us also to these links between global goals and local actions. So, okay, there are some global goals and global agendas, and we need to understand that. And I mean, not only the Sustainable Development Goals, but also all these global issues, especially inequality, this global power architecture, relationship between the countries, and what can we do locally in order to contribute to change the thing that we are not satisfied with. To come back to this old school, but still, I believe, valid, like Paulo Freire and similar, changing the circumstances and changing things in the world for the better. So how can we contribute to solve these global problems? And then, of course, I mean about peace and poverty and violence, all the things that are serious threats to democracy and to the human rights. So it means also to inspire the feeling of a global responsibility of all citizens in all countries. And last, but of course not least, teaching universal values, teaching human rights, teaching social justice, because these lacking to do this is the threat to the democracy. And democracy is not just local political actions. It's not just, oh, we go voting and we take care about our community. It also means being aware of human rights on a global scale and social justice within the countries and among the countries. So that would be about the content, my first thesis. Second one is about cross-curricular approach. What does that mean? It means simply that every teacher and every subject can contribute to teaching democracy. That means that in each of the subject, or almost each, we can include some of the content relevant for democracy. Well, maybe not in mathematics or chemistry. Well, I'm not sure, these are not my topics, but history, art, literature, and so on. So there are many, many of the topics or subtopics in these fields that we can relate to democracy and human rights and freedom and so on. Then further on, teachers in different subjects, they can integrate current event in their environment, what's going on, discuss this, include it as far as appropriate. But most important, they can incorporate some of the democratic principles in their classroom management or in the organizing their teaching and the educational process. There are many things that they can do. They can and should use activating method, participatory method, interactive methods. Here in my drawing, in my image, you can see this is probably something about digital skills. So people say, well, we cannot teach democracy if we teach like Microsoft or something. Well, I would say, yes, you can teach democracy when you teach any subject, because you can use interactive methods. The way you communicate with your participant, how much you give them the voice, how much you interact with them, or how much you enable interaction among them, the atmosphere you create. Do you teach in authoritarian way or in democratic way? We know that every education is political. Let's not be blind about that. And political in the best positive sense. It means every teaching and all aspects of the teaching styles, teaching method, communication, books and handbooks and so on, they are all based on a certain system of values, and they all express or reflect these values. So if you have authoritarian style of teaching, no matter if it's history or human rights or mathematics, so your participant, your students will feel that. And you will teach them either democratic style of communication or authoritarian style of communication. You can also use it to encourage them, to expose them to different perspectives, and in that way encourage respectful dialogue and, of course, critical thinking, no matter which topic, but also values like teamwork, respect, solidarity, and so on. So this was my second thesis. And third one is the most important one. That's about experiential learning in a broader sense. And here I'm referring to three aspects or three levels of teaching. First one relates to the cognitive level, information we are giving and we are sharing with our students. And this is very important. I mean, without knowledge, without information, we cannot create any opinion. It's not really an opinion, but just some ideas. So first one is the cognitive, and this is the starting point. But second one is social emotional learning. And we know people are not ready to be engaged and to try to change the things, to be active, if they are not emotionally moved. So it's up to teacher, trainers, facilitators, moderators to inspire this social emotional learning, to create the atmosphere where this will happen. And last but not least, embodied learning, which is especially in the digital era, not so much prominent, but I think it should be. This means going out, being active, using your body, your movement, being there, participating in events, in public spaces, and so on. Of course, experiential learning could be created also in a concrete educational context. And here I'm referring to Jack Mazzero, but even more to Stephen Brookfield, who were showing the examples of how you can create this kind of transformation that will trigger people, trigger their emotions, and trigger also their agency. It's about creating agency of the students and participants. And you can do it also in a traditional educational setting in different methods. But additionally, or moreover, students should be also engaged in their real life situation in events. So education shouldn't be sitting in an ivory tower and ignoring what's going around, but include that into our teaching or going out and engage in these concrete events and situations. Then, but not only creating and not only participating and being engaged, but also creating different local initiatives, community initiatives. That's what we know under the term now, it's this whole concept or a theory of public pedagogy. Going out, that's why embodied learning is important, being there, occupy the public space. This is the deep sense of democracy, showing people that they are citizens. They have the right to that space, urban or some other space. That's their space, and that's the act of democracy, going out, occupying in a way that space or using it for public purposes. It means organizing visit to public spaces or to governmental offices or go to different kind of events or exhibitions, but also organizing public discussions, public forums, taking part in different solidarity actions, different initiatives, going to the marginal groups, doing something with them, organize something, different type of solidarity actions, but also advocacy actions, advocating for, well, free education, human rights, or minority rights. But it's about going out and doing that. We have been doing it for quite a few years in different spaces. For example, at university, where I'm teaching education for democracy and citizenship, that's what I do with my students. There is no examination. It's not like, show me what you have learned by heart, which theory. Examination consists of the act, go out and do something. Or prepare a project, what you are going to change in your environment. At our university, there are many things you're not happy as a student, happy about at our university, or in the community, or with the local government, whatever. Do something, organize something. Sometimes alone, but very often in a small groups. They get tasks. Of course, they choose the topic and the action, but the task is to plan this action and to show educational aspect. Basically, that's what is in the title called Democracy Beyond the Traditional Didactics. It's not teaching and preaching about democracy, it's doing democracy. The best way to learn about democracy is doing it. And that's, of course, the basis of experiential learning. That would be my short input. Thank you. And now I'm very open for your comments and questions.
Thank you, Katarina, for this very well prepared and brief explanation of such a big, broad topic. And also the aspects you mentioned, this somehow shift from citizenship education to global citizenship education, the cross curricula, the cross cultural curricula. And I think this is many of these aspects we try to include also in the Democrat project. And I took note of some questions, and I was thinking about, what do you think? What implications do or does it have if we redefine curricula in relation to global citizenship education, as you explained it, and what would it mean for the redesign of curricula in schools, but also for the roles of teachers in schools, in public schools?
Mhm. It's redesigning curriculum and allowing teacher to shape it. It's also an act of democracy. That's why curricula is usually very fixed and predefined in the countries that do not have a long democratic transition, where education system is quite centralized and arranged in a more or less authoritarian way. So giving teacher a freedom to redefine curricula and to let it reflect what's going on. I mean, in the local community, in the school, in the society, that's an act of freedom. And in some countries, it's almost impossible, but it's also indicating of a level of democracy. Still, I believe even in that these situations, there is some space for the teachers to do that. So I believe teacher training, and as you can see, I'm a big fan of teacher training. I believe this is the core of all our democracy teaching. So in the teacher training, I think it should be included, this element or this task. How can I adapt curricula to the needs of the group and to the current setting? This is so-called emerging curricula. Things are happening and not curricula, fixed curricula can predict all of this. And of course, if possible, in the countries that would allow more freedom for a teacher, then I would definitely insist on including more of these global issues and things that I have mentioned, but also space to react to what's currently going on. And just to add to this teacher training and the importance I'm giving to it, you can create a wonderful curriculum, amazing, the best one in the world. If you don't have a good teachers to implement it, good teachers, well, what is a good teacher? Of course, it's relative, but we can say in this context, teachers who are teaching in a democratic way, who are open-minded, who are good in applying participatory methods and so on, then none of the curriculum will help. On the other hand, even with the curricula, which is not perfect, and we can never have a perfect curricula, teachers who are well-trained, who are sensitized for these different approaches and for these democratic methods, they will be able to adapt this curricula and to make the best out of it. I don't know if the answer helps to answer.
Of course, a lot. This is more a general question. I always think also in relation to projects and also research, but this is now more related. How can we foster change? How can we, what do you think, how can we engage the decision makers, the political decision makers, in order to reflect on the kind of education systems we have in many countries, and how can we engage them to include more the global citizenship education or democratic education into the curricula? What do you think?
And I was wondering if I could just add on to that, because I'm wondering where you start with that in a less robust democratic system where there's not even really room for that change. I know, I think in certain, obviously, EU countries, it would be a lot easier to introduce that. But then, a lot of countries also looking towards accession into the EU. Where do you start with that as well? Sorry about that. Didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's okay. Well, I think we have to be active on all levels, from the micro level in the classroom up to the decision makers, parallel all the time. And of course, when it comes to decision makers, this is, well, advocacy. That's what my organization, you can see here, my logo, International Council for Education, that's what we do, basically, advocating and making lobby among the policymakers. And just to share kind of a bitter experience I recently had, there is, high-level political forum every year in July reviewing SDGs, and peace, SDG 16, and peace and human rights and democracy, this SDG is under the review this year. So there were plenty of the sessions already about peace and human rights and so on, UN and UNESCO with various stakeholders. And education is very seldom mentioned, which is really disappointing. I mean, how are you going to guarantee in a sustainable way, long-term way, democracy, peace, and human rights, if not through education? Of course, there are many actions, but I believe we know peace is it's about changing mind of men and women, as it's in the UN Charter. And
got a comment from the chat from Camille Royal, who says, I feel democratic groups are often too polite, and the voice of non-democratic groups shadow democratic views. Should we allow anyone to say anything, or should we be firm against certain approaches?
Yeah, that's another tricky question, but let me combine these two questions. So advocating policymakers is a tough task. They are very resistant. But on these events that I mentioned, they have been talking about measuring progress. How do we measure? What are the indicators? And my only comment was, look around the globe, look Europe, what's going on with democracy in Europe, and look around globe, what's happening with the peace. What kind of measures do you need? What kind of indicators? Look how the world looks like, look what's going on in Europe. So let's see how we can change it. So confronting them with the real life consequences of the current policies, including educational policy and the curricula. The other problem are those who are resistant. I mean, war is the best business. So how can we advocate for peace, democracy, and human rights if there are big groups that are profiting from that? Well, another kind of advocacy is needed there. It's not the moment to talk about it, but it's difficult, but still, I would say, very much needed. And which voices and who is loud? Well, my approach would be quite, should I call it liberal, although this term is so misused today, but I will explain what I mean. I'm not for forbidding any talk or canceling, except in extreme situation. I think an open dialogue is absolutely needed. And we, when I say we, I mean those who pledge and advocate for peace and democracy and human rights, we should be more loud. We should be more present. We should do more networking and more stronger advocacy and more pushing and, screaming and shouting for the values. When I say screaming and shouting, that's what we sometimes really did in UN and UNESCO. And that's very much needed. So not silencing everyone, but exactly the opposite. We should be more loud. Work together and be loud on a local level, national level, checking what our governments are doing, going to the global level, checking what UNESCO and UN are doing.
I have also another comment. Well, this is something you can enter very deep, but I think there's always this kind of to find the balance between, we are living in a profit-oriented world on one side, and on the other side, I don't want to say that it's not that a combination is not possible, but it seems to be difficult sometimes, that we have democratic values, humanistic values, and to find ways to combine both in little steps. I think this is really important. And reflect on that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I believe some aspect of neoliberal economies are the biggest threats for the democracy. Neoliberal economy has a capacity really to occupy all the spaces and to integrate different ideologies, democratic, but also very non-democratic, as long as the profit is there. So non-democratic practices are fine. So we have to fight on both fronts to use these terms. Yes, as you rightly said, this is sometimes really difficult, but we can do it even in a micro level. Going to the schools, for example, not supporting, as I mentioned in my first thesis, not supporting competitiveness, but teamwork, solidarity, humanistic values. So this is not a big deal, but still this is a kind of contribution. Of course, as a researchers, we can fight this positivist paradigm, measuring outcomes, performances, and going for more approaches, also methodologically approaches that will support more humanistic paradigm, but in the classroom with our students, in our advocacy. This is this is really slowly, but if everyone is contributing a little bit, I believe together we can change the bigger picture, and not only change, but really transform. And I believe that's the issue with the use, the word transformation is very much used, but I believe we don't realize very often how deep it should go in order to be called transformation, and not just, oh, we did change a bit something.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think we're running out of time. I don't know, Vanina, do you have another question? Is there someone in the chat who wants to comment something?
I had a slight comment that I think was kind of answered by Katarina, but I was sort of curious how we as educators can provide, these learning opportunities on global issues like poverty, which, for example, in certain parts of the world are not as prevalent as in others. And I'm wondering if, integrating these humanistic values into that teaching is obviously a way to sort of go about, especially I think in issues where some people just cannot relate to what that is. But yeah, that was the main thing.
Absolutely important. And I always insist on that. I believe in Europe we are a bit spoiled. I dare to say it, in spite of all the difficulties we do experience and challenges we have. But compared to other parts of the world, we are. And we should be aware that there are some costs of that and there are some consequences, and bringing these issues to the classroom, to put it like this, but in a way that will be close to our students, close to their hearts, bringing information, bringing stories, going to the background of what's going on in Africa and Middle East. So it's not just something in the news, in newspapers and the media. It does relate to us. We are connected to that. Maybe not directly, but there is a connection. And we, in a way, we contribute to that, but we can also oppose, and we can also make things, change the things. So I believe this is crucial. This global aspect is really crucial. And again, the role of a teacher to do that.
In the chat, we've got Georgios Kostakos asking, is this discussion limited to education systems and initiatives in Western liberal democracies? Or is there a really global element of global citizenship that would apply to all 193 plus Palestine states? Yeah. Similarly, Carmi Roya says, is democracy a compulsory part of the teaching training curricula internationally, transnationally? If not, why and how to change that? So two questions about internationalism.
Yes. I did talk very much about the global, and I think it's important. The focus here, because we were talking about Europe, the focus is what are we in Europe doing or not doing, and how is our behavior or the lack of certain actions influencing international community. But of course, the topics, international topics and global relationships are also in the so-called global south very important. But then it would be also critical thinking, empowering them, also their agency. It's not like, well, poverty, the relationship, the governments and so on, we cannot change anything. As a matter of fact, there are plenty of the things that they could do. And when I teach in Africa, and I do quite a lot, these are also the issues. But of course, the needs are different. The context is different. So the perspective is different. But there is also this international view very much.
So thank you. Thank you very much, Katarina. We are running out of time, but it was really a pleasure to speak to you, to listen to your opinion, to your research, and to share your insights with us.